this meetup on how to get started on your coding journey. My name is Danny, and I want to welcome you to this session. I hope you're all having a great day. So let's jump into the agenda for today. And before I take you through the agenda, this session will be a little bit different because I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions, because when we go through the topics of today's discussion, naturally you will have questions about the things we will talk about. So you will have the opportunity to do that. Also, before you wait for us to get to that window where we do talk about some of the topics we're covering today, I welcome you to also type in the questions you have already. So I'm sure you already have questions in your mind, and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, I hope they touch on that." Put your questions in the chat. Anytime it comes up, a question comes to your mind, put it in the chat, and what we'll do is at some point we will address them. Today's session is about how you can get started on your coding journey, and we will answer that question, this big question, by going through a number of items. For example, how to choose a programming language. As you know, there are many programming languages to choose from, and if you're new to the world of coding, this is probably the biggest question for you. In fact, even if you are someone who has experience developing, you may have thought about trying different languages, and that's something we'll get into. We'll then go over what a tech stack is. So we see, if you want to become a developer, it's not sufficient to only know a programming language or programming languages. You need to know the things that surround the programming language. As a developer, you will have to learn tools and how to configure your computer. You need to know, long story short, there's more to becoming a developer. There's more to coding than just knowing a particular programming language. So once we talk about the tech stack, we'll then go over other terminology used in coding. And I've made the selection of very important ones for you to understand. Then I will very briefly talk about an important application that all of us have on our computer. You may have interacted with it, or you may have never touched it in your life. It's called a terminal. I'll tell you why it's important for you to know this, because as a developer, it's something you'll be working with a lot. And then I will tell you how you can launch your own site in 1 hour. Now this is not a coding tutorial, but towards the end of the workshop, I will tell you, I'll share a resource with you for you to move on to after this workshop is over. Okay, so today, this session will be about giving you clarity about different coding terminology and giving you a guideline to start your coding journey. Okay. Now, everything we covered today is borrowed from what we covered in the coding bootcamp. Okay, so we always have questions about the coding bootcamp that we have here at AstroLabs, and this is something I will talk about at the end of this workshop. Okay, but first, let's start with the big question. So you are someone who, by the way, let me ask everyone, if you have experience coding, type in yes. If you have no coding experience, type in no. And I want to see, how many of you are actually beginners and how many of you have probably had you handled coding. So if you have experience, even if it's limited, just type in yes, otherwise type in no. But irrespective of your experience, like I said earlier, what programming language you choose to focus on, what tech stack you choose to focus on, depends on what problem you're trying to solve. So say I am someone who has never written a line of code. I don't even know how coding works. It's all alien to me. How do I start? Well, you need to first think about why you are even thinking about coding. Okay. By the way, can I ask everyone to keep your microphone on mute so everyone can hear uh, without any, without too much noise. So yeah, what do you want to think about is what are you trying to, what problem are you trying to solve? Okay, so is it about making it easier for people to find some information? For example, that would be a UI problem, a user experience problem. Okay, so that would mean you'd be getting into something like front development. Now, by the way, I'll talk about front end and back end in this workshop. Are you trying to solve a computational problem? Now, I know people who are biologists, like they work in wet labs, and they want to use the power of computers to solve problems that have to do with, let's say, DNA. Okay, well, maybe you want to you have a business and you want to bring your products online, so you want to launch an e-commerce website. So my point is, what language you choose to start with depends on what problem you're trying to solve. And then from there, the discussion becomes, okay, which platform would be the best place for me to bring this solution? Is it mobile? Is it laptop? Is it excuse me, web? Is it desktop? Is it a web server? So sometimes you may have a solution that users don't even see, like there's no graphical user interface. And I'll give you some examples of that if there is time. Okay. But let's move on to the next slide, because even if you don't know exactly what problem you want to solve, maybe this has to do with you wanting to choose a maybe you're attending this workshop because you're considering changing your career. Maybe you're a college student or a high school student, and you want to think if this is for you, and you want to first experiment, you want to first practice some coding before you can even answer this main question. Now, like I said, there are many programming languages to choose from. For example, if you want to build a desktop application, or let's say you go beyond computers. Let's say you want to write code for an airplane. The operating system of an airplane, or even these self-driving cars that are now becoming very popular, are written with languages like C++ and C. Okay. What about machine learning? Like computer vision, or you upload where you have a video that is being streamed to the computer, and the computer is saying, hey, this is in the foreground, this is in the background, this is a person, they're smiling, they're frowning, etc. Python is the ideal language for that kind of domain of machine learning. What if you want to build a mobile application? Well, it depends. If you want to build a Android application, you have to learn Java. If you want to build iPhone application, you have to learn Objective-C. So this is what I meant when I said choosing the right language depends on what problem you're trying to solve. Now, this brings me to this programming language called JavaScript. I am sure most of you have heard of it. Even if you don't know what it is, I'm sure you've heard this. You've heard this name before. And in this session, I'm going to tell you that the best language for you to learn as a beginner, or even as an experienced developer, would be JavaScript. Why? The three key reasons are, number one, it is easy to start learning JavaScript. It is easy to learn JavaScript. I'll clarify that. I'll expand on that point in a moment. Number one is easy. Number two, it is a programming language that you can use to build applications. Listen to this. Build applications on every platform there is out there. What do I mean by platform? Mobile, desktop, embedded systems, robots. You can use it in machine learning. Now, machine learning, it's JavaScript is kind of new in that domain, but it's a possibility. And I'll tell you why in a second. So it's easy to use. It can be used on different platforms. And there's a very, very big community. In fact, the biggest community, uh, the programming language with the biggest community today is JavaScript. Why is that important? Because if you have a big community, more people are sharing code, sharing ideas, sharing solutions. So you, as a member of that community, as someone who works with that community or shares, is a developer in that ecosystem, well, it just becomes much easier for you to get this to find solutions more quickly, and you can build advanced applications more quickly because there's so many people out there who are sharing ideas and code. So what are the 3 main points again? Easy to use, can be used everywhere, and it has a big community. Now let me talk about the first point for a second. Easy to use. You see, if I don't know how many of you have maybe experience working with a language like C++ or Java, or maybe even C#, or maybe you may have you may have even more your experience with coding is even goes further back in time, or you maybe have worked with a language like Fortran. In those languages, in order for you to have a program running, see, a file that contains code is what we call a program. And when you put that program to the CPU, we call that a process. In order for you to have a program that can be turned into a process in a language like C++, Java, C, Fortran, you need to know a number of things. Like you need to know the prerequisites. You need to know important prerequisites before you can even like write the simplest program. Like there are some key things you need to know in a program before you can even write a simple program. In JavaScript, that's not the case. You can have a program, like you can write 1 line of code and call it a program. That won't be a useful program, but technically speaking, it will be like you can get started without anything. Like if you go to your browser right now, there's something called a console. You open the console and right there and then you can write JavaScript code. It's incredibly easy to start. Okay. Now I want to come to my second point about why it's easy. Oh, excuse me. What it is about JavaScript that makes it possible for you to build applications on different platforms, unlike the other ones. So I told you like C++ is limited to embedded systems and operating system languages. If you want to like build an app like Photoshop or Microsoft Word, that is C++. But you cannot use C++, for example, for building web pages. You cannot use C++ for machine learning. I mean, technically, hypothetically, you could, but it's not meant for that purpose. Conversely, you have a program language. You have a program language like R. R is the best language out there for like data science and statistics and that kind of thing. But it is not something you can use for web programming. But then you have something like JavaScript. Okay, you have JavaScript which can cover all of these fields. Why is that? Well, every programming language out there needs to, well, let me word this properly so I'm not too confusing. You do not work with a programming language in isolation. Like I said, you need to configure your environment. Like your computer has to be configured in a way to make it possible for you to write that programming language. For example, if you want to write programs in Java in that programming language, you need something called JVM. If you want to run a programming language like PHP, you need something called Apache. In the case of JavaScript, if you want to run JavaScript, you need something called Node.js. So what are these applications? Let me come to this slide for a second. So I mentioned 3 technologies. Okay, you have Nginx, you have Nginx, you have Node.js, Apache. What these things do, let me, I won't call them things. They're actually programs and applications you install on your computer. So just like you install Photoshop, just like you install Microsoft Word, just like you install, Google Chrome as applications on your computer, these apps, Nginx, Node.js, Apache, are also apps that you install on your computer. What these applications do is they convert the language into something called machine code for the operating system. You see, your operating system, whether it's MacBook, whether it's Mac OS, whether it's Windows, whether it's Linux, etc., these operating systems do not understand programming languages. They do not understand PHP, JavaScript, C++. They only understand binary. You know, I'm sure some of you may have watched The Matrix, where you have all these ones and zeros. That's the only thing the operating system understands. So how do you go from a language like PHP to binary? How do you go from a language like JavaScript to binary? How do you go from a language like Ruby to binary? Well, you need some application to convert, to translate. So for JavaScript, I want you to focus on this. For JavaScript, that program, that compiler, that's the word, that's the term we used to refer to something like this. That compiler is called Node.js. Node.js allows you to go from a language like JavaScript that the operating system does not understand to something that the operating system does understand. Why is this important? What Node.js does in this scenario, it makes it possible for you to take JavaScript, convert it into something or an object code that any operating system can understand. Let me say that again. If you look at web servers, if you look at smart devices like smart watches, if you look at mobile phones, if you look at embedded systems are like equipment that are electronic. Like for example, when you go into a mall, these electronic doors open. When you approach the sensor, that's an embedded system. Or for example, when you want to enter a parking space and the gate opens up, that's another embedded system. So web servers, smart devices, embedded systems, and even robots. Okay, these computers, they're all computers, have some kind of operating system. And in most cases, they are running something like Linux, a Linux operating system or Ubuntu operating system. What is that? So why is this important? Because Node.js understands those Ubuntu, understands the Linux very well. So because Node.js understands those operating systems very well, that means you can install Node.js on those operating systems. And if you can install Node.js on an embedded system, on a web server, on a smartwatch, and a robot, well, that means you can write JavaScript on those computers. You can write JavaScript on a smartwatch, on an embedded system, on a web server, on a robot. Do you see where I'm going with this? Because we have Node.js installed on those computers, you can learn one programming language, and with that one programming language, you can program all of these different computers. This is why we highly recommend that you begin your coding journey with this programming language. And even if you do have experience with different programming languages, it's always a good idea to start learning JavaScript. One more thing before we move on to the next slide. Now, even if you have already begun learning different programming languages, like let's say you've heard of Python and you were convinced it's a great language, which it is, by the way. Just because you learn Python doesn't mean you can't learn JavaScript. But here's my point. If you learn Python, or if you know Python already, you can quickly learn JavaScript. Why? Because irrespective of what programming language you choose, syntactically they may be different. but they all share key features. So if today you learn JavaScript and tomorrow you decide to learn Python, no problem. Because you learned JavaScript, because you've learned the key components of this programming language, you can easily apply what you've learned to quickly learn another programming language. So you cannot go wrong with JavaScript. Okay, so going back to those 3 points I talked about, it's easy to learn. So you can start coding today. And I'll send you a link after, towards the end of the workshop where you can begin like building a website for yourself today. You can use JavaScript for any platform. So whether you're a web developer or a mobile developer, or let's say you want to even build applications for smart devices, great. You want to go with this language. You can be a cross-platform developer in no time, easily. And of course, you have a big community. So I'll take you to another slide where I'll tell you about the JavaScript community. In fact, let's actually go to that slide and I'll expand on the third point. Okay, but before I talk about the community, let me tell you about the tech stack. This idea of a tech stack. So I told you that if you want to become a developer, it's not sufficient to just know the programming language. You need to know the environment in which that programming language is used. So for example, if you're a PHP developer, you also have to know something about Apache. Now, of course, the focus of today's session is JavaScript, so we're not going to talk about other programming languages. But for JavaScript, the tech stack is Node.js. So you need to know about Node.js, the different tools that surround Node.js. Then you can begin building applications written in JavaScript. Okay, now there's one more layer. Irrespective of what programming language you choose, irrespective of what tech stack you choose, you'll always have a graphical user interface. Okay, now let me make 2 more points. Back in the day, like if you go back 10 years ago, if you wanted to build a graphical user interface for websites, the answer to that, or the only way you could build a graphical user interface for your this web-based application would be for you to know HTML, CSS. I mean, HTML is designed for browsers. Like you cannot use a different language to program a web interface. It has to be HTML and CSS, even today. And if you wanted to build a graphical user interface for a mobile phone, well, like I said, you'd have to go with something like Java for Android, Objective-C for iOS, and C++ if it was a desktop application. The Node.js has been so influential since it was created back in 2014. It has been so influential that it has made it possible for you to learn JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, which are web technology. These were only for the web. JavaScript, HTML, CSS, these 3 were only meant for the web. But it has been so influential, Node.js, that people have found ways for you to write JavaScript in HTML and CSS, but then ship that app, deploy this app that was written with web technology on a different platform, like mobile. So for example, if you had been learning web development in the past few years, or even if you started learning web development recently, and now you've decided to, for example, write mobile-based applications, you can use what you already know about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and with the help of Node.js, you can take your website, because if you write something with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's a website, but you can use Node.js to turn this website into a mobile application. I want you to think about that for a second. If you learn how to build a website, you can build applications on different platforms, especially mobile. The converse is not true. If you're someone who had mobile application development experience, you cannot turn your mobile application into a website. But if you're a web developer, you can have a both web app and mobile application by virtue of Node.js. And you can't say the same about the other stacks like Ruby and PHP and the others out there. This is something unique to JavaScript, which is why JavaScript is today the most popular programming language out there. It's incredibly versatile. I mean, it's amazing that it's an easy language to learn. At the same time, it's versatile, like you can use everywhere. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, coming back to the first question, how do you begin your coding journey? So I want you to learn JavaScript first, put your focus on JavaScript. But in addition to choosing this as your primary programming language, you want to choose the web as the primary platform on which you write that programming language. In other words, I'm telling you to begin learning web development. Even if your intention at some point will be to become a mobile application developer, or let's say even a machine learning developer, a good starting point would be to learn web development. Because what the skills that you acquire in your journey to web development, you can apply that to build applications on different platforms. One more thing before I move on. Back in the day, the web platform browsers were designed to show you very simple documents, like a page with some text and simple images. And if you want to do something advanced, like designing a three-dimensional mechanical object, that's what you do. That's, for example, what engineers use. The engineers use something like AutoCAD, for example, for designing three-dimensional mechanical parts. For something like that, you'd have to install desktop applications. Okay. And if you want to play a video game, well, we had consoles for that. Today we have mobile phones for games. However, today the web has become so powerful. Like computers have become so powerful, softwares have become so sophisticated that all of these things that I've mentioned, you can do on the web. Like there's now a web version for AutoCAD. There are games in the browser. There is 3D modeling in the browser. There are advanced analytics dashboards in the browser. There's video streaming in the browsers. I'm sure you all have Netflix. You either have it on your phone or you go to the Netflix website. I mean, the web has become so sophisticated that now it is almost like in many cases you have like a native experience. It's like nothing you can do on a desktop you can't do on a web. And as time progresses, the web will increasingly become the most important platform out there. Okay, so I mean, think about that. If you're going to begin your learning, if you are going to start your coding journey, then you might as well begin with what is and what will continue to become the most important platform in all of computing, the web platform. Okay. By the way, as we are progressing through these slides, I'm sure right now you have questions popping up in your mind. Don't forget to put those questions in the chat so we can, because shortly I'll open up the session to allow you to ask some of your questions. Okay, so put those questions in the chat. But before we move on, this is what this tech stack is. The tech stack means the program language and the environment in which the program language runs. Okay. Okay. What I'm showing you here on the screen, I suggest you take a screenshot or take a note of these items. These are the things you need to get started with building applications today, right now. Like you would need all of these on your computer to begin programming. Let me run through these very quickly. The first one, is a code editor. They're sometimes referred to as IDEs, integrated development environments. There's something like VS Code is very popular, by the way. I put it here because I highly recommend it. But you have other ones like NetBeans, Sublime, Notepad. It's not important which IDE you choose, but you want to have an IDE. So if you've never written a line of code in your life, go ahead and install VS Code. It's a lightweight. It won't take much of your space on computer, and it's quite straightforward. So begin with VS Code. Then you want to install Node.js, right? Because I told you if you want to start writing JavaScript, you need something that will turn JavaScript into machine code, which allows it to be run on the operating system. So you need Node.js. It's a small application that you install on your computer. Okay. Keep this point in mind because when I come to the slide about terminals, I'll have to talk about this again. So you need an application called Node.js. So you will install this, you will install this. Okay. JavaScript, you do not need to install. You just write it. Like you can go to GitHub, or you can watch some of our videos on the AstroLabs YouTube page. You see some examples of JavaScript code. It's quite simple. There are plenty of tutorials out there that will help you, that will teach you to write simple JavaScript code. But you will install this, and find a few links for yourself to find a few resources. We have many on AstroLabs YouTube channel for, to help you with the basics of JavaScript. Okay, now the others that I'm about to show you, these are a bit more advanced. Okay, on a Monday we recorded a meetup about these in more technical detail, so you want to check that out. But let me go through them very quickly. NPM is also another app you will install on your computer. So once you've installed VS Code and Node.js, you will have an app called NPM. Okay, NPM will allow you to install libraries. So remember the three things I told you about JavaScript, like why it's so good. It's easy to use. It can be used on different platforms, and it has a big community. Well, NPM is about the third item, the community. So for example, let's say you want to write a script that turns Excel sheets into CSV. Now you can sit down and try to figure it out yourself, or you can find someone who's written that code and you can borrow their code. That's what NPM is for. Okay, that's what this application is for. Node.js will allow you to run JavaScript for the operating system. NPM will allow you to download libraries that the community has provided. Now, how about the other items here? So let me jump to another slide before I talk about Git, the server, and MongoDB, and Postman. Okay, because I'll take you to a visual slide. By looking at the diagram, you will understand how these pieces come into play. But I want you to know that you will need all of these things to begin web development. Okay, when you have all of these that I'm highlighting here, you will be able to learn coding, build a website, and deploy a website. So you will have an actual web application live in the internet if you have all of these components. Okay. But everything you see here, all of these items you see on my screen, they fall into either two categories. And you will need them both for either front-end development and back-end development. In simple terms, Front end refers to the graphical user interface. That's what the user sees. When you open the Netflix application on your phone, or when you go to the YouTube website on the web, uh, even an ATM machine, by the way, even if you go to an ATM machine where you have that screen and the track and the number pad, the thing that the user interacts with, we call that the front end. Okay, and everything that's happening behind the scenes. So when you click on a button, when you type in some information and you click on send, that information when it's sent, the application that processes your information, we call that the backend. Okay. Now, when you begin your journey as a coder, as a developer, you will at some point have to decide which of these routes you want to go through. Which one do you want to specialize in? Because they're both quite advanced. Okay. Now, if you're a beginning developer, you can actually build both. Like you can do both front and the back end. And I told you there's a tutorial that we recorded recently where we teach you how to do both of these. But modern day web applications are quite sophisticated. And it is not always possible for someone to be a great front-end developer and a great back-end developer. So at some point you may have to choose both, but it is possible. It is certainly possible for you to be competent at both. Okay. Now, nonetheless, when it comes to web application development, we have two categories, front end and back end. Okay. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about back end, because in that tutorial I told you about that there's more focus on front end, but I want to share with you the key concepts in back end development. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So front-end development, I will share a link with you where we can learn about front-end in more detail, and you can actually begin like you will begin coding immediately, and you'll be able to deploy your website in 1 hour. So don't worry about the front end. But let me talk a little bit more about this component, because if you learn this, you will also be able to appreciate the importance of this. Okay. So this slide is about important concepts in web development. Okay, so this slide is about demystifying modern day coding terms. Now there are many, and I'm sure you have come across many terms that you've heard of many terms, and you've always wondered to yourself, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I'm going to open up this session, and I'm going to open up a window for you to ask these questions. But let me go through some of the important ones. I've highlighted some of the important ones, and I'll take you through them. The web, the World Wide Web, the internet, is based on one important foundation, one key technology. Like without this technology, the internet would not have even existed. That foundation is called hypertext. So hypertext is this idea that you have these documents, these pages. Today we call them web pages. You have these pages. And the way you go from one page to the next is through something we call a hypertext or a hypertext link. Okay, now we, in everyday use, we just call them links. Click on this link to take you to this PDF. Click on this link to go to that page. Click on this link to register your page, to register your account. The technical term for those are hypertext. The only way you can have one page here and another page here and go from this page to that page is through hypertext. Okay, this brings us to two other components, HTTP and HTML. What do these acronyms stand for? HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And these two go together. Like these two components are part of the hypertext system. These two have made it possible for the internet, to exist. Without these, we have no such thing called the internet, and without the internet, we would have no web applications, and you and I would not be interacting together. Right now, as I'm talking to you and you're watching me on your laptop or your phone, my video is being streamed via HTTP. Okay, so in simple terms, HTTP is how two computers talk to each other on the internet. Okay, it is how two computers talk on the internet. HTML is how you present information on the web page, on the internet. It is the UI. So today, when you went onto the Meetup website and you clicked on RSVP, you are interacting with HTML. You are interacting with HTML. Okay, and when you click on that RSVP button, you use HTTP to send us AstroLabs a confirmation that you're attending today. So these two are the pillars of the internet. Okay, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And in that link that I will share with you towards the end of this workshop, you will learn a great deal about HTML. And on Monday, we recorded a meetup on APIs. In that video, you will learn a little more about HTTP. So these two things, make sure to check them out. I won't go into details with the API because that was the discussion we had on Monday. We had a session on Monday called Introduction, Building Your Backend with Node.js. I talked about APIs in great detail, so you check that out. But API in simple terms is how API is about API. So API is just the rules for how two computers talk to each other. So we know that HTTP makes it possible for two computers to talk in the internet. API specifies the rules in which these computers have to communicate. Okay, I won't get into detail about that. But what about the word cloud? The word cloud simply means internet, by the way. So when you hear words like cloud computing, the cloud, by the way, is just a marketing gimmick. It doesn't mean anything special. The word cloud and internet, these two are the same thing. So when someone says cloud-based applications, they really mean internet-based applications, like an application that you work with on the internet, as opposed to installing on your desktop. When they say cloud computing, they mean internet computing. So for example, machine learning on the internet, analytics on the internet, video streaming on the internet, as opposed to downloading the video on your computer. A server is a computer specialized for web applications. That's what a server is. So when you go to YouTube, that is a web application for video streaming. That's a server. When you go to Amazon to check out their e-commerce products, that is a server. It's a computer designed to receive requests from users and send them products, information about the products. The server is a computer that is used for web applications. Okay. Now, in a server, let me come to the next diagram. It's actually in the other presentation. But in a server on the internet, you basically have two nodes. Like in the internet communication, there are two terms you need to be aware of, and you will come across this a lot. Client and a host. Both the client and the host are computers. Both the client and host are computers. For example, when you go to YouTube, when you type in www.youtube.com and you navigate to the YouTube website, you are the client. More specifically, your laptop is the client. When you open your phone to attend a Zoom session, your phone is the client and Zoom is the host. So if today we all of us go, for example, to the Amazon website to check out the latest iPhone, the Amazon server, the Amazon website server, we call it the host because it's hosting the information, and all of us who are browsing browsing the website, we are referred to as client. So these are some of the key terms I've shared with you, okay? And I want to give you the opportunity to ask some of the questions you have. Like I noticed someone talked about Drupal website. Let's see what else we have here. So I guess you're still waiting for the opportunity, but I want you to type in your questions. These are some of the terms that I've highlighted, and I want to know what questions you have. What are some of the terms that you've come across and you've wondered, what does this mean? You can type them in the chat. Okay. By the way, this session is being recorded, so I'm talking about a lot of technical terms. So naturally, you'd want to revisit this video so you can, like research these components one by one on in your own time. So we have a question about CI/CD. That is a bit. That is an advanced concept. I'm not sure how much time we can go through it, but let's see the best way I can answer this in a short span of time. Okay, so this would be a good time for me. That's a great question. So, like I said, the web has now become the most important platform out there. Okay, the web has become the most important platform out there, and you want to begin your journey with web development now. Because, or let me say that again. Even though the web has become the most important platform, it doesn't mean, and it's the most important and it's easy to get started, okay? It's easy to learn to become a web developer, and it's the most important platform out there. However, it doesn't mean that it's like easy all the way. So you have a low entry barrier. You have a low entry barrier, so it's easy to get in, but there's a high ceiling. Like there is so much you can do on the web. And as you become more experienced, as you start learning more about web development, you will come across terminologies like CI/CD, which Harry has put in the chat. CI stands for continuous integration, continuous development. You see, because the web has matured so much, because it has become so sophisticated, because now we can have different kinds of applications running on the web, it is important for you to also learn techniques that were used on more traditional platforms. For example, building an application on the desktop is not easy. You have to know a great deal about programming and tech stacks, testing to build a desktop application. So for example, if you look at an application like Photoshop, Photoshop is huge. It's a huge application. And many developers have been working on this one application. Okay. Whereas websites, not really. Websites are quite simple. Like I told you, we have a tutorial in 1 hour you can build a website and deploy it. But that doesn't mean that all web applications are simple. If you look at an application like Netflix, Netflix is very advanced. YouTube is very advanced. So if you want to build an application like YouTube and Netflix and Google Maps, another web application, then you need to learn more about software engineering. Like you have to The software engineering is what you would have to learn for building building native applications or mobile applications, because those platforms are quite advanced. Okay, web applications can be quite simple, but they can be quite advanced. Whereas desktop applications, mobile applications, they're not quite simple. Like you can't write a few lines of code and say, "Hey, I have a desktop application, I have a mobile application." You have to do quite a bit of work. On the other hand, as someone who knows how to build mobile applications or desktop applications, they know a great deal about software engineering. But since the web has become so important, has become so, so popular and so sophisticated, now if you want to build sophisticated web-based applications, you have to start learning software engineering. So this is where CI/CD comes into the picture. Now, unfortunately, we don't have time for me to get into that topic specifically, because I have to cover like surrounding topics before I can define CI/CD. But I think I can share with you some resources at the end of this workshop, so you can learn about that in more detail. Let's see, what else do we have? So we have a question that says, yes, so Kishav, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, asks, I know some C++, but what if I want to create applications for different platforms? Like I have a business idea, or I have a great solution, like I know something that can help people, and I want this to be deployed on web, desktop, and mobile. Would JavaScript be enough? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Now, Kishav, I'll answer your question this way. When you write a program in C++, ultimately, and you should know this, ultimately your C++ language will be compiled into something called machine code, and from there it will be turned into binary. If you need, since you're a C++ developer, you know this. Now, because you have Node.js, once you have Node.js installed, you can take your JavaScript, feed your JavaScript into Node.js. Then Node.js will do exactly what a C++ compiler would do. So C++ has GNU, right? The GNU compiler. Node.js will do exactly what GNU does. It will turn JavaScript into machine code, and then from machine code, you will have binary. So ultimately, as long as you can get your code to be converted into binary, you can build a program on any computer. You just you have to be able to get your language to turn into binary. If you have that bridge, if you have that mechanism, then you can run a language, you can run an application on any platform. So that's the mindset. So that's why I say yes, you can do it. You learn JavaScript, get familiar with Node.js, and you can build an application on any platform. And by the way, your C++ experience will also come in handy. Okay. So let me come to this slide very quickly, and I want you to take a screenshot of this. Let me actually paste this thing in Zoom, because I want you to check out this link. This is about deploying your application in 1 hour. Okay, so this is a tutorial recorded by Ahmed. He's the director of the learning programs here in AstroLabs. And here in this session, in 1 hour, he shows you how to deploy your own website. So make sure to check that out. Let me quickly talk about this slide. So today I also wanted to talk about the terminal. So let me go full screen here. You know that, so I told you about Node.js, right? I told you about Node.js and NPM, these two applications you need to install on your computer. Here's what I want you to know before you begin. Node.js is an application. However, it does not have a graphical user interface. So don't think that you will have like an installer and then you install and then this nice window opens up and there are buttons and forms and radio. No, none of that. You see, I don't know how many of you have worked with the terminal before, but effectively, there are two ways you can talk to your operating system. There are two ways to work. There are two ways you can use your computer. One is through using applications. Like, for example, if you want to browse the web and you want to watch a video on YouTube, you open Chrome, you open Safari, you open Internet Explorer. That's one way. You can use an application to tell the operating system to do something for you. If you want to calculate something, okay, you don't have to become a master of programming. There's an app. You click on calculate, the calculator opens up, and you can start doing arithmetic. However, that's not the only way you can talk to an operating system. The other way you can talk to an operating system is to use a terminal. On Windows, it's called a command prompt. You can either use an application to talk to the operating system on your behalf, or, listen to this, you can talk directly to the operating system using a terminal. Now, there's a language called Bashscript. You have to know Bashscript if you want to talk to the operating system. But if you want to bypass the middleman, if you want to bypass applications, there's something called a terminal. There are many applications on your computer that you do not know about, that they're running in the background without you knowing, and you never see them on your operating system. That's because the only way to interact with those applications is through this terminal. So if you've watched movies like Mr. Robot, or if you ever see pictures of hackers, they always have something like this come up. These people are talking directly to the operating system. They're not using any applications. Well, Node.js is one of those applications. If you want to interact with it, you need the terminal. Okay, so it's not. And by the way, don't be alarmed by its appearance. Don't be fearful. Oh my goodness, this is something complicated. It's not complicated at all. It's not user friendly, but it's not difficult. Like, you don't have to be a genius to work with this. So keep this in mind. So when you do install Node.js, I want you to know that you'll be working with this tool. Okay. What else did I want to cover? We are running a bit out of time. Yes. This is important. So in addition to Node.js and NPM, there's something else called Git. Now, Ahmed talks about this in the other video, the link which I shared just now. He talks about this thing called Git. So you will install Node.js. You will install Node.js. You will install NPM. Now you'll also want to install something called Git. Git has two important functions. The first function, the primary function, and by the way, all developers know about Git. All professional developers know about Git, whether they're a web developer, a mobile developer, etc. They all use Git. It has two purposes. Number one, Git is used for version control. Number two, it's used for deploying your web application. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time, so I won't be able to get at this, but make sure to check out those two videos I told you about. The one that Ahmed recorded and the one we recorded on Monday. With that, I want to quickly talk about the Koni Bootcamp, and then Maggie will come in with the in a second. So everything I talked about in today's session, these are some of the things we cover in the Koni Bootcamp. So very quickly, the Koni Bootcamp is a 2-month program. The upcoming one will be starting soon in November. It's 2 months. We take you through all of the things I talked about today. You will learn about front-end development in great detail, and you will learn about back-end development in great detail. So you'll know all there is to know about building modern, advanced front-end applications with React. I want you to research this on your own after this. React. So applications like Netflix, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of them use React for their front end. So we will teach you this in the Koni Bootcamp. We will tell you about, we will take you to, for example, the main data structures and algorithms that any programmer must know. And we will teach you how to develop your backend. So you'll learn things about APIs, databases, and by the end of the bootcamp, you will learn to build a full-stack application with all of the key features like login, registration, database, saving information to the database, and you will have 2 applications running on the cloud by the end of the bootcamp. So to learn more, I want you to visit this link. Okay, and I'm sure when you're going there, you probably would have some questions. Don't forget to put your questions about the Koni Bootcamp to us. And finally, I want Majid to now jump in because he wants to tell you about this in greater detail. Majid, if you can take it away from here, please.
Thank you, Danny. Hi, everyone. Just before we end the webinar, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the journey that you can be taking with us. One of our main goals is helping the tech community in the UAE grow. So besides the course that Danny just mentioned, the Coding Bootcamp, where you can build your own website, it's very practical. It really readies you up for a career or for building a website for your business. We also have alumni exclusive events. So once you finish one of our courses, you'll get access to our network, where a lot of people who have graduated from our previous courses, a lot of companies that we source candidates for, talent, experts, they all exist within this network. And our alumni has access to it. As a part of our alumni, you'll also get access to our exclusive events. So once you finish the course, your experience with us doesn't stop there. There's an opportunity to continuously learn because we always have free alumni exclusive events that build on what you already learned in the Coding Bootcamp. So I'm going to be sending a form in the chat here. I just sent it in the chat. If you're interested in attending our course or signing up for our newsletter to be notified of our future events, do fill out the form. It's a quick survey, takes a minute, and enter your details in it. And we'll be reaching out to you, to speak to you about the course or to sign you up with the newsletter. I'll give you a minute or two to fill it out.
Yeah, I also highly recommend everyone to fill out the form, because if you do sign up for the newsletter, we sometimes do these events, but it's not always easy for you to learn about them, and you will miss out because we do these meetups regularly. It will be a great opportunity for you to learn topics that are like the ones we covered today or the one we recorded on Monday, and we also talk about other things besides like the things surrounding like web development and application development and machine learning and marketing. So like for example how to like how to get into the industry professionally, like career related topics and that kind of thing, career transition topics and that kind of thing. So you'd be really missing out if you don't sign up with the newsletter. But we have reached the hour. I hope you all had the opportunity to share, to access the link and complete the form so you don't miss out. I want to thank you all for being with us today. Don't forget to share your questions with us after this session. Don't forget to check out this video after the session. And until the next meetup.
One more thing just before we close. If you're interested in viewing a recording of this meetup, also please fill out the form. I'll send it to everyone who fills it out as well.
Yes, I forgot to mention. Yeah, if you want this video, you do need to fill out the form. So if you do want to revisit this video, just make sure you've registered so you don't. When we send them out, you also receive it in your own email. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, take care and bye-bye.